What we're now going to showcase is the 10 to 19 campaign, once again a product of collaborative effort between funders, nonprofits, and Dasra. If you could have the video play out now, please.
Almost half of India's adolescents today are making it through to secondary school with aspirations for a better tomorrow. But there are those like Payal who invariably get left behind. All of 14, talks of marriage will probably mean an end to any such hope for an alternate future. Out of the estimated 250 million adolescents in India, many like Payal are burdened by circumstances that deny them their full potential. At 15, Rakhi is a mother to this undernourished child, but her situation surprises no one. Bharat here, on the other hand, has had to drop out of school to help support his family. Accounting for about 20% of our country's population, India currently has the largest cohort of adolescents in the world today. If we work to turn their stories around, these adolescents can serve not just as catalysts of change in the lives of their siblings, parents, grandparents, children, and the communities around them, creating multiple circles of impact, but with agency, they will be able to realize and rise to their full potential, ensuring a successful transition to adulthood. The 10 to 19 Dasra Adolescence Collaborative recognizes this potential for change. Until about 2008, pockets of non-profits engaged in sectors like health, education, and employability faced a common challenge. They had limited incentive for collaboration and hardly any formal structures to help build towards it. Recognizing this gap, 10 to 19 took the crucial step of aligning funders, non-profits, technical experts, and government organizations to partner and work in collaboration in a bid to bring about positive and sustainable change. From a space till now constrained by segregated funding, the collaborative facilitated a shift that was unique in many ways. The collaborative today aims to reach 5 million adolescents over the next 5 years and channel over $50 million. Evaluation, learning, and robust monitoring have always been important for the collaborative. But now, years of research have led the collaborative to its 4 measurable outcomes, those that encapsulate the biggest challenges adolescents face today. First, supporting adolescents to complete secondary education. Second, ensuring adolescents build agency and self-efficacy. Third, delaying their age at marriage. And fourth, delaying age of first pregnancy or birth. So, how does this collaborative plan to work? First, 10 to 19 aims to bring about a changed focus to the funding environment. So, from focusing on funding activities and outputs, it plans to focus instead on funding outcomes.
I think outcome-based funding really helps us to invest, to measure, to create evidence and really assure outcomes. Because the kind of issues that we work on cannot really be attained in shorter terms.
Next, a select group of non-profit organizations in specific geographies will be supported to deliver comprehensive programming at scale.
One of the cornerstones was knowing that it wasn't enough just to send you to school, you to a health clinic, teach you about how your body works, that every girl had to understand all of those things, or whatever cocktail of things it was that she needed so that her life would change. But of course it's not enough just to change a girl's life. She needs her brothers and her male peers to also have different mindsets and to have different opportunities.
10 to 19 will also work on monitoring, evaluation, and learning by collecting robust data on results and measuring the effects of interventions.
We've all been grappling with many interventions, many programs, But how do we know that they're working? We don't have the hard evidence to say, yes, if you do it this way, this is the outcome we'll achieve. And I think that's the need and that's the importance of evaluation.
The government of India is really looking forward to different partners helping them to rethink their adolescent programming. And so rigorous data, rigorous evaluations from this 10 to 19 collaborative will also serve as a roadmap for the government of India to rebuild and restructure their adolescent health program.
And lastly, the collaborative will engage with the community of practice to create a collective voice, to engage with the government and the larger society in order to produce large-scale systemic change.
What's also very important is to ensure that there's normative change, that we change the mindset from the ground up through social behavior change communication, as well as top down from policy, as well as governmental institutions, and bridge that gap. And that is where the community of practice comes in.
There is a fifth player in this team as well, perhaps the most significant, the adolescents of this country themselves. Through fulfilling the 4 measurable outcomes, 10 to 19 will strive to change not just lives, but the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that limit the lives of India's adolescents. Together, change is possible.
So with this background on the collaborative, we'd now like to unveil the Collaborative Force report. The report captures Dasra's learnings from designing and setting up the adolescent collaborative. It offers some advice to aspiring collaboration architects working on other challenging issues and populations. This report was made possible through the support of the Bank of America. At this point, I'd like to request Kaku Nakhate, President and Country Head of Bank of America, and the bank's Philanthropic Committee, to please come up on stage and formally launch the Collaborative Force report. I'd now like to call upon Shale Ginetta, the lead for the Dasra Adolescents Collaborative, who will tell us a little bit more about what we've discovered through this research. Shale.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. As you saw the video, it's been just about a year since last March when we launched the collaborative. It's been a tough year. As you saw, we're talking about ambitious goals, but we've had lots of learnings this 1 year. And with the support of Bank of America, we've launched Collaborative Force, a report that documents our learnings on what's worked, how we brought alignment across stakeholders to bring together this collaborative, but also very much what hasn't worked, what are our learnings, what have been our insights that not only us as Dasra, not only the people in the sector, but all of us as multi-sectoral players can come together to learn from, imbibe, and work on. And this is one step in our effort in a 5-year journey. We hope to year on year document all of our learnings, understand what we're doing, how we can do it better, and with the feedback of everybody in this room and across the sector, look at absorbing all of those learnings and information and data to make the work that we're doing in the sector more robust. This report, Collaborative Force, looks at at showcasing how do you bring together collaborative funding to support an ecosystem design to support a particular cause. It looks at effective design, how do you conceptualize certain frameworks, and not only the hard facts of how do you bring together collaborative functioning, but also some of the softer pieces. How do you ensure there's open communication between all of the stakeholders? How do you ensure there's trust? How do you ensure that it's beyond personal egos or organizational mandates, and that you put together, you put the client, the community that you're working with at the center of the work that you're doing? That is the essence of this particular report, and we would like to thank Bank of America, who has supported us in documenting, codifying, putting together our learnings on this, and they're going to be supporting us year on year. And of course, they've been supporters of our work on adolescence for over quite a few years now, not only funding the work that we're doing, being thought leaders in the sector, but also championing this issue and being there for us when we need that support. So thank you very much, and we welcome you to please pick up copies of this report and tell us, give us feedback, and continue to be champions of the work for adolescents. Thank you. I now invite Kaku Nakhate, Peter Smitham, Vidya, Shah, and Neera to share their experiences in collaboration and provide insights on how to make large-scale collaborations work in India. Please welcome.
So there's only 3 chairs on stage because I'm going to be distracting and walk around here and check on who's sleeping and who's not. But more so that the 3 of them have a lot to offer to the issue. But I just wanted to take a moment and have you all just turn, if you have some of the research reports with you, to turn to page 40 and page 41, just to give you a sense that this is only but initial. And what's been really great to have Kaku and the team support us is just beginning to document how we're building this 10 to 19 collaborative is really an effort to be able to share with each of you as you start to think through the value of collaboration, just what are the different actors that are placed or can be placed within a collaborative. So I hope you just see this as an initial sharing of our experience as we sort of go down this journey. So my 3 eminent panelists, for whom I'm not going to speak to their bios, I'm going to have you look at their bios in here, because we print these. So you'll see their backgrounds in there. And so I wanted to start off with my first question is really when you look at each of their backgrounds, they seem fairly similar. And it can be a good thing or a bad thing, but they're all from the financial services. Maybe that's what makes the world go round. But if you can share just from that perspective, how has that shaped, in your mind, how you're looking at impact, how you're looking at collaboration, and how you're looking at sort of your philanthropy? And Peter, I know you were going to start with this perspective.
Neera and I spoke outside just for a couple of minutes, and I was saying how clearly we're influenced by our backgrounds. So when you think about the people that are here, I'm going to say a few words about my background, because that influences so much about the way I think about philanthropy. So my background, I grew up in one of the poorest parts of the UK, and within that very, very poor town, a very poor area. So I started with literally no money. I spent a lot of time in the venture capital business. So over 30 years, we invested in 300 different companies. So when you talk about scaling, capacity development, then a large part of my background is in that area. For the last 15 years, I've worked in an organization called Atlantic Philanthropies, which is one of the largest charitable foundations in the world, and it's spend down. And the focus of Atlantic Philanthropies, $10 billion pot of money to use, it's always been focused on the vulnerable and the disadvantaged. And the focus on adolescent girls in India was because of all of the communities that we'd studied and looked at over many, many years. It's almost impossible to find a group that is that disadvantaged. So think about those threads. Neera's question about philanthropy, how important it is to have demonstrable impact. The question was raised earlier, would you fund expansion of something that was not proven? In the investing business, you never would do that. And in Atlantic Philanthropies, you wouldn't. And I've never really understood why you would want to grow something, but you didn't know that it was going to work or not. So I've got no doubt about it. There's a very, very famous article about leeches. Leeches are these little animals that sort of suck your blood. Imagine when that was being used as a form of medicine 400 years ago, that people had just said, let's have more leeches. You'd have had no impact. You'd have been magnifying and rolling out something that didn't work. And I have a problem, if you like, understanding why people would want to do that. Neera, I think this is one of the most profound things that Dasra has written. It's impact first. Demonstrate impact. Modern philanthropy, and there's a great book by a guy called Teeny and Fleischman that have written about modern philanthropy, and in it they talk about demonstrable impact, ability to scale, but funding that will help organizations grow and develop, not funding that will just go into programs. So the message from this, one issue, being cause-focused. I think processes you can vary, but causes you've got to be very, very clear about. Adolescent girls is the focus of the collaborative. That's what it's about, and it's very, very clear what it's about. And harnessing organizations that can come together. And that creates an interesting word. Collaboration, if you like, isn't an abstract. You don't decide whether to collaborate. I think what you decide to do is whether you want to grow, or whether you want to become more credible so that you can influence a government, or whether you want to drive up competency in financial systems or monitoring and evaluation. So collaboration is not the end in itself. It's a way of acquiring skills that you need to grow and be effective. So never think about collaboration in isolation. Normally it starts with a problem.
Great, thank you, Peter. Kaku, do you agree with Peter's perspective and given your own, also coming from a finance background?
I would say that touching different lives is a part of finance. In the sense, if you really look at the bank or any other financial institution, you are touching and making a difference with the help of finance as how to improve the lives. And that's why I feel some of us come from a similar thinking. Having said that, if I were to say that as I grew up, my father always believed that part of the salary check has to be donated. My mom continued to believe that in the March end, I had to have 2 special checks for us on community. And I think Indian culture is to really make a difference, and we do make a difference in each one of our lives in smaller ways as we can think. But time has come for India that if India has to grow, and it has to grow at 7% GDP, it's very important that the lower income people and the lower middle income people really take that move up, and that can put India on a new growth path. For them, the intervention is very, very important. And that is simply stating also the IMF study as to what they are talking about on making an impact across the globe as far as the weaker sections are concerned. And why collaborative, to your point, and I agree with what he mentioned clearly, is we have taken up this topic on adolescent girls for now over 2.5 years. We have seen the difference that it can make to the livelihood, especially on the adolescent girl that we earlier started with sanitation. I've realized that when you fund a toilet, say, for a adolescent girl being in the house, how her respect has really grown in eyes of her own family to be able to get the toilet because she was an adolescent girl, and the family benefited. And it has been an eye changer. But with the funding that we have, we are able to make an impact, say 4,800 households. But is that enough to change and put India on the growth path? The answer is clearly no. And while we may compete in day-to-day lives or with competition, I think for this change to happen, you need societal platforms which actually imbibe the cause that they are fighting for, whether it's a food security or it's impact on the adolescent children of our country. And for that, I think the collaborative, as you actually have articulated, and you were one of the first believers actually in actually putting it, and I agree, this has the most impactful 6 lines that you have written on the right-hand side, and I'd encourage all of you to read that, because that is really how collaborative is really defined. And we feel that we've come to an understanding that together we can probably contribute even more to the fight that we are causing. And I also like the idea when Dasra came up with it as to, we had several debates. Why not different parts of the country? Why only one part of the country? And as we go along, we can talk about it, but I realize the importance of doing it together in a smaller place, seeing the impact, measuring the impact, and probably influencing policy that could be rolled out everywhere. So thank you for us also having, us as a partner with all of you all.
Thank you, Kaku. Go ahead, Vidya.
So I think the story of EdelGive is very closely intertwined with the story of Edelweiss, and I don't think EdelGive would have happened and been created the way it was if some of us in the early team of EdelGive had not experienced the growth of Edelweiss. And one of the things that we realized as we were setting up the foundation is that forget the not-for-profit world, even the for-profit world has severe capacity constraints in terms of org building advice for young entrepreneurs. When I joined Edelweiss, I was the 10th employee. By the time we went public in 2007, we had almost 1,800 employees. And that 7-year journey in building the foundation was very critical for my learning of how organizations get built. We were always very aspirational, so the whole journey and the, sort of the balancing of the different ingredients required for org building, people, capital, technology, processes, back-end, all of that was something that I witnessed very, very closely. And there are, your board adds a certain amount of value, but the early team plays an incredibly important role in building the organization, and their learnability, their curiosity, their ability to question, to go out and get advice, to go out and get, just help in building an organization is so critical. And so when we started funding nonprofits, we found that the missing piece was really the org building capability. That was absent, and there was really nobody doing it. And so therefore, when we set up the foundation, we said we'd always do funding along with capacity building. And we used Edelweiss employees and continue to do that to help build very strategically, fill in the gaps, do solutioning around where the org building challenges are. And therefore, I think the learning and my own experience is not so much around financial services, but it's more around how organizations get built. The second bit that I think I learned really from Edelweiss was asymmetric payoffs. So this is something that we talk about a lot in Edelweiss, where we made very early investments in unknown businesses and really built by just investing early on, 5 years, 6 years before you could really see the runway and the takeoff, like our asset reconstruction business, which is the largest in the country today, and a lot of other such businesses, we realized that making early small investments actually helps in the long run. And we see our own societal investments with the same perspective. We have the ability to take risk. We know what risk-taking is, which is what we've learned from financial services. But our ability to then leverage that by making those investments and convening people around causes has been incredibly important in the way we've looked at even investing in EdelGive and in our NGOs.
So all three of you look extremely relaxed on our stage and are making this whole collaboration partnership thing seem very easy and, you know, the whole world's a happy place. But the reality is that it's challenging to actually make them effective. So they sound really good. They're an SDG also to have partnerships and collaboration. But give me a real sense of, you know, what are the challenges in the collaboration? I mean, I can speak from our own experience that managing the individual personalities is actually a very difficult thing, except managing these personalities was easier. But personality, ego, you know, you spoke a bit about risk-taking, Vidya. You know, is it actually de-risking when you're collaborating, or is it even riskier? You'd all just get to hide and be a bunch of free riders in a collaborative. Give me a bit of sort of the harder side of what we don't see.
So I think I can speak from our experience of running a collaborative. We run 2 collaboratives. One is around education in Maharashtra. We work in 4 of the poorest districts. We have 4 funding partners who've come together, and we have 2 implementing partners. I think actually, to be honest, setting up the collaborative has been much easier than actually going through the journey of implementing what we had set out as common goals and common objectives. Where in the second year of implementation, we've had incredible on-the-ground challenges, which even if you know in advance, doesn't necessarily prepare you with mitigation strategies. One of the biggest challenges we've had is that in the 4 districts that we work with, there are 28 tribal dialects, and children actually don't have Marathi as their first language. So how do you teach young children whose first language is not Marathi, whereas all the textbooks and every government measurement of learning outcome is around language in Marathi or in, you know, and is surrounded by the language issue. The second big issue we faced was around migration. There's huge migration. Children are not in school for 3 months of the year. 30% of the class usually disappears between September and March. And what do? These are the challenges that you face when you start implementing. And therefore, the dialogue at that time and actually rejigging outcomes, keeping a focus on the long-term outcome versus a year-to-year outcome, and really preparing for setbacks. Preparing for setbacks in implementation teams, because implementation teams actually get created once the collaborative is funded and founded. And those are the challenges that actually come up. So for us to keep focus on the long term within the collaborative and to use communication as an incredibly important tool to do that has been actually a bigger challenge than egos and logos.
Go ahead, Peter, and then I'll come to you, Kaku.
I can think of 2 collaboratives I'd like to talk to you about. One, when Lynn and I first decided that India would be the focus and adolescent girls would be the focus within India, we needed a partner. So this is real collaboration. We didn't know enough about India. In fact, we knew very little about India. We were very, very passionate about girls, but we didn't know much about the interventions. We certainly didn't understand the cultural context. We certainly didn't have the communication skills. We didn't have the relationships. So exploring with Neera and Deval and Paksan and Vishal, which was a process we went through on one of our early visits that was sort of quite long, we had to explore how that would work. What did Dasra need from us? So Dasra, to focus on girls, needed to create a team. So how was that going to be funded? So the first grant that we made was to fund a team of people focused on adolescent girls. Neera and Deval and the organization had the skills, they had the networks. This is real collaboration. They didn't have the money to fund it. So that was the first step. Getting a team to focus on girls was one issue, but what about the overheads that were associated with that? What about the increases in finance, HR, communications? What about the extra space? So part of our grant went to that. And then half of the money actually went into grants supporting organizations in the field. And that went in through giving circles. Giving circles is a very, very effective process. Dasra reuse IP. They provide a full range of services to the implementing partner. So it's a great example of collaboration. And now, whatever it is, 7 or 8 years later, we still get on very well. We're still compatible. The first phase was the alliance. The second iteration is the collaborative, the Dasra Adolescent Collaborative. So when you think about that as another example of collaboration, and now this is on a much bigger scale, there are 4 implementing partners in this room who actually will do the work. They're already capable of demonstrating their impact. So Cine, C3, Quest, Angan, 4 great organizations. This is a collaboration. The work that Dasra will be doing themselves. SIF, and the representative from SIF is on that table. Again, great. The Tatars will be involved in this group. Novo will be supporting Angan. Anand's here somewhere. Packard bringing their skills. So when you think about a collaboration, that now has a totally different dimension to it. People that provide money, people that provide implementing skills. Dasra, they'll be providing some of the leadership and training and development and also being the host. I think that's a perfect example of collaboration. Interesting dimension of collaboration. Lynn and I had a complete preoccupation. It would be Maharashtra because it was on our doorstep. We thought we knew more about this. We thought Dasra knew more, and therefore the risk would be lower. USAID came in, and Xerxes is here somewhere. I think I saw him this morning. There he is. And we were sitting in Delhi. We've completely fixated on Maharashtra. And the first thing that Xerxes says is, we're going to Rajasthan. Now, that was an example of sometimes how you create alignment. So it was an interesting debate. Why did he want to go to Jharkhand? Why did we want to go to Maharashtra? Because in his mind, the need was greater. In our mind, which location was easier. But it was a conversation, and it's a good conversation, and it's healthy when you have people with different objectives. But we created the alignment. We get on incredibly well. So what USAID brings to the party in the collaborative is amazing. And they were also the first supporters of the alliance, which was iteration 1. It's SIF's first entry into Dasra and the collaborative. But their contribution is immediately impactful. We had a meeting of all of these players on Tuesday, whichever day, I've lost track of the days this week. But it was amazing. Listen to the different perceptions of the organizations that they are in this collaborative. There's a very clear need. There's very clear alignment. There's a very clear willpower to make it successful. I think it has the ingredients to work. It's still going to take a lot of work, but certainly the framework is there. And Bank of America, sorry, I left you out, key supporter of that exercise as well.
Kaku, please, yeah. Kaku, go ahead and share your...
So, you know, for us to also get into a collaborative was an internal debate itself. And I realized with my team, we kind of had days at end of debate that whether we should be doing it ourselves or getting into a collaborative. Finally, we came to the right conclusion that it's time to really get into a collaborative. And while we do the individual interventions, I think we should work together as a collaborative and bring fresh thoughts on the table for the cause that we really support. And I must say that that we ourselves have gone through an exercise over the years where philanthropy is not being done just by the CSR head, but all the different LOBs who have got passion in doing philanthropy, like we have my colleagues, Abhi, who is the legal counsel and very passionate about Jharkhand also, if I may say. And we have our research guy, Prasad, who really questions me all the time on the CSR activity we do. And then Neha is, of course, there. And we have a larger 16-member team. And we realized just debating ourselves in the last 2 years has really upped our game in doing interventions in the society. And I'm sure we are looking forward to the collaborative. To Neera's point, I think a good collaborative cannot be easy. It has to have tough debates, because the idea of debating a thing when we're trying to work to a common cause will actually bring out the best. But if we bring egos on the table, which I'm sure none of us would like to, right? It's not a deal that we are trying to win, where I think our ego has to let loose. I think we will find a much better ground on a societal platform. There are different interventions going to be required, whether it's a quant-based intervention, it is a technology-based intervention, it's a research-based intervention. And for the collaborative to have different partners, I think we can actually latch on to the volunteering, as she mentioned, where we can bring the best foot forward amongst all of us to fight for a common cause. And I must say, the first 1 year, you have a hard challenge on hand. Most of us have really partnered because we trust Dasra to be able to bring the collaborative together. And I think as we go into Jharkhand, we'll realize the, how would I say, the diverse nature of that population versus, as he highlighted, we were also very comfortable with Maharashtra because it's near, we can go and see, we can do volunteering, and all the same reasons like you suggested. But then at the end of it, that to have state which actually supports you, with to have everybody around who is going to help to make it happen, I think the collaborative has got a much better chance to really have an impact. And the NGOs that everybody has chosen together are also going to help us to have all the 4 interventions to longitudinate or increase the life cycle from 10 to 19, where a young woman can become a confident woman of tomorrow. And that's why I'm really looking forward for our own learnings on the collaborative.
Great, thank you. And just my last question before we'll open it up for Q&A is, you know, the 3 of you are quite enlightened, and we have some first-time givers. We have folks who are individual philanthropists and families that are very early in their journey of giving. What is your advice in terms of partnerships and collaborations? Should they go at it alone, figure it out first, get some impression of what it's like, and then maybe have something to contribute to a partnership? Or do you think, what's your take on it? Is it sequenced that way? Should they do both? What's some advice that you can give to some of us here?
If I may say, first-time givers always, you know, you can adopt 2 paths. One is you need to really be clear as how much time you want to spend on giving. Is it just about money, or it's about getting involved, or it's to kind of, you know what you really want to get out of the whole experience? If the answer is clearly that, no, I want to personally get into things and I want to really pursue and learn from it, I would say it makes sense to work with very different givers in an individual capacity or as a collaborative, and actually influence the learnings for yourself as well as the group. And I think that impact is much, much better. If your interventions are of large size or are like how Bank of America globally believes that we have to give back to the communities where we operate, then you might have a different institutional-led strategy in which case you need to really work as an institution, establish yourself, get your more people involved, get the volunteering going, and then collaborate. So I would say for individual donors, it's better to work as a group.
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting process, understanding what you actually care about. And it's difficult without reading and thinking and talking to lots of people. You know, why did we come up with adolescent girls and why did we come up with India? Both long stories, and I'm not going to go into it, but it was certainly a lot of debate. Once we were in India, we got a financial services firm called Copal to use about 15 different measurements and tell us the difference in infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates, how long kids had been in school, everything you could think of. But that's the way that we are, or perhaps in that particular instance, sort of like highly analytical. Perhaps it's the way that I am. Lynn's part was very, very clear from almost the beginning. It will be adolescent girls. Why adolescent girls? Because she'll change her kids, she'll change her parents, she'll change her grandparents. They're really influential people. So it was a series of conversations. I probably meet one person a month who'll be coming in with varying amounts of money, and they'll say things like, well, what should I care about? What do you think I should care about? I don't even know how you answer a question like that. Because, you know, where do you come from and what do you care about? Lynn and I went to an event that was held in a bank, and I sat next to a guy and on one side and his wife on the other. And every letter that he receives, he's very rich and he's Indian, every letter that he receives requiring a donation, he puts in his bedside drawer, and he opens it on Christmas Day, and he writes a check for £50,000 to every one of them. Now, we all laugh, but it makes him feel good. And people tend to do what makes them feel good. People need positive feedback, so it depends which way your positive feedback comes. If you don't get that positive feedback, or if you don't feel you're being successful, or if you don't feel you're being heard, whatever your personal characteristics are, you don't tend to go with it. So I think choosing the cause. I mentioned earlier the Fleischman and Tierney book on modern philanthropy, and this has influenced many people that are in this room that tend to come from the big foundations. So I'd read, I'd meet people, I'd talk to people.
Thank you. Vidya, go ahead and then I'll ask.
I think collaborations require a great deal of maturity. Maturity of the participants, maturity of the structure. And therefore, I think early philanthropists should really wet their feet in experiencing in their own way and learning in their own way before you get into a collaborative. The level of discussion, the level of questioning, the level of argument and debate that a collaboration requires throughout is immense. And I think we learn from each other, and therefore, you build the collaboration in that way. And therefore, I really feel that early philanthropists should write a few checks, experience, decide what they want to get out of it, and then, look at getting into a collaborative.
Great, thank you. We can open it up for questions. I can call them. Yes.
First of all, Peter, what's the name of that chap who writes the $50,000 checks every Christmas? But yeah, I got my letter ready. No, sorry, my question is to all three of you. As funders, as philanthropists, one of the things that we've been thinking about, and Dasra has also, I think, flagged that issue, is about failure, right? And how are we doing a better job of talking about learning from failure? One of the things that we've been discussing with a series of grantees is that how is it that a donor actually tries to structure the space for failures to become an acceptable part of our business, right? We tend to sort of, structure business as more towards success and impact, etc. But I don't know, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, how is it that you create that sort of, currency for failure or the space for failure? I don't know, is it even aspirational or is it something you would want to sort of keep to a minimum? But what's your take on that?
Go ahead, Kaku, and I'll ask all three of you. All three of you can comment on this.
So, to my mind, it's very important that when we are building societal platforms, the interventions need to be measured, and that's why the impact needs to be assessed. If we are early in life to assess the impact and turn a bit when we are going wrong and accept that, we'll end up with the final intervention, which will be a lot more lucrative. And that's what I feel needs to be measured. We've seen ourselves that when we have done grants, and when we started off, it was just grants, and then it was talk. Then we had Dasra also evaluate them for us every 5-6 months, and we had debates, and we changed, and we actually had interventions where we went back, learning from different NGOs as what was the best practice. We realized, like for example, the HR or the capacity utilization is a challenge for scale up when a lot of monies have been given after the CSR grant. And as a result, I think while we speak today, our HR is working with quite a few NGOs to bring up the policies, to help them with what we see. All may not be applicable at what Bank of America policy is versus, but it's important to have a kind of a way and method. So to your point, I really feel that time has come for all of us, whether we do individually or whether we do it as a collaborative, to start measuring impact, because it just helps to influence the direction in which way the grants and the NGOs to be supported, so that we all can up the game, and it kind of provides a direction. It's like analyzing stocks in my own way, if I would say. Like, you will always back the good ones versus the bad, but it doesn't mean that the bad ones are bad. We can actually help them scale up, and that's why I fully agree with you on this point.
There's another question, unless you want to add something. Go ahead. Sorry. Add something, and then I'll go to the next question.
No, I think one is, for us at least, it's been important to define failure. I think the worst failure would be if there are significant unintended negative consequences of your work. But if you invest sufficiently in due diligence in the quality of the organizations and also helping them through building their capacity along the process, usually failure gets limited to one of 2 or 3 things. It could be delays. It could be a much smaller impact than originally planned for. Or it could be that the challenges that came up were never anticipated. I think we're willing to live with that. And we're willing to plan for that. We're willing to give extra time and money for that. So that's been our approach.
The first thing would be to have conditional grants. I know they have unattractive features, but it gets organizations to focus so you can review progress. And once you need to review progress, you've got to be very, very specific what you're going to monitor. So I think donors can be effective partners by literally structuring so much money for the first 3 years. There'll be certain benchmarks. Making sure that, we talked about sequencing with Dasra, it's so often you see companies that take issues out of sequence instead of focusing on the ones that are most important. It's like they take the ones that are most easy but don't necessarily have the most significance. So sequencing events in the plan, they're platitudes when you say mistakes should be one-offs. But having a learning culture, and that's why organizations like Dasra, I think, have so much to bring to the party, because you're getting lessons from across all these organizations that you have the ability to share with them. And not all commercial lessons transfer easily, or they definitely don't transfer easily. And all the evidence says that small fragmented industries, which is what philanthropy is, have a problem in creating infrastructure. They don't have the money to get the talent or the systems or the visibility on what they're doing. So fragmented industries are very, very difficult to make much money in or to be successful in. So it's a tough challenge for the philanthropic world.
Great. Well, that brings our panel to an end. I'm sorry, Ashok, but you can ask the questions directly. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective. I hope each of you will contemplate jumping into a collaborative sooner rather than later. And we will break for lunch, or Suranjana will tell you where you go. Thank you.